One. All right, everyone. We have the wonderful Lee Herrick. I'm going to read this bio because I'm not going to do it justice trying to go off the top of my head. Lee Herrick, hailing from Fresno, is an esteemed writer and professor at Fresno City College, an MFA program at the University of Nevada, Reno at Lake Tahoe. Having previously served as Fresno Poet Laureate, Herrick's literary works vividly celebrate the essence of the California experience. During his tenure as Poet Laureate of the City of Fresno, from 2015 to 2017, Herrick spearheaded local initiatives aimed at fostering community cohesion and empowering youth through writing expression. Herrick's poetic repertoire delves into the richness and complexity of the California journey and the resounding success of the American narrative. Born in Daejeon, South Korea, and adopted as an infant, Herrick's upbringing in Modesto steeped him in literature, art, and a myriad of cultural influences. His writings poignantly captured the immigrant experience, evoking sensory experiences from the aroma of chapchae to the resonance of mariachi trumpets, from the bustling midnight farmers market to the casual conversations with Armenian neighbors. Herrick's body of work embodies Herrick's body of work embodies a Whitmanesque celebration of the state's essence, the vibrancy of the Central Valley, and the collective identity of its residents. This past year, Governor Gavin Newsom has appointed Lee Herrick as California's 10th Poet Laureate. Announcing the appointment, Governor Newsom remarked, as a teacher, poet, and father, Lee eloquently explores his identity as a Californian, inviting others to reflect on their own connections to the state. His dedication to showcasing diverse narratives of Californians through poetry renders him an ideal candidate for Poet Laureate. I eagerly anticipate his contributions in inspiring communities and individuals statewide through the power of the written word. And please welcome Lee. Lee, if it's okay with you, can I call you Hyung? Uh, brother.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Robert, for
much.
having me.
So when or how did writing find you?
Mm, that's a good question. And wanted to just say thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you. Um, I've started to think recently about a question like that. And even though I was adopted and left Korea when I was about 10 months old, I think that writing found me or music found me before I came to America. I don't have any specific memory of it. Um, but whether it's true or not, I want to believe that somebody sang to me or somebody read something to me, as an infant.
Hmm.
Um, but more specifically, I guess when I was probably around maybe 7 or 8, I would always play Scrabble with my mom, or, she was always doing crossword puzzles. And so words and letters really started to become a regular part of my life. And I was reading pretty voraciously already by then,
Wow.
mostly about sports books. I'm a huge sports fan and played soccer throughout my life. So I was reading a lot about sports. Um, and writing, probably in high school, I started writing, or I started trying to write little rap songs. And then, those turned into poems, and I studied poetry a little bit. And from there, it really became a part of my life. I was writing pretty consistently after that.
Lee, can you give me 1 second? Sorry, the light turned off.
Sure,
Right back.
no problem.
There we go. For artists, writers, um, looking at other writers than yourself, would you say writers are more narrow-minded or open-minded? And could you tell us what your experience is with that? Your encounters with
Could
other
could you
writers?
say could you say that again?
Looking at other writers and yourself, would you say writers are more narrow-minded or open-minded,
Other writers?
including yourself?
Um, More open. That's an interesting question. Um, Maybe it's a little bit of both, I
Mm,
think. I don't know that writers have the market, or I don't think they have um, necessarily a more open-minded view. I mean, there might be something there with the imagination if
Hmm.
we were to equate the imagination and creativity with openness. But my guess is that many writers are relatively narrow-minded when it comes to ideologies they disagree with or other things like that. I don't know. Um, I'd like to say, and I'd like to think open-minded, but I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
I just threw that out there because, I my experience as a writer and then meeting others too. I mean, is this gift of being empathetic, and because looking at like getting past your own perception, looking at other people's perspectives, while at the same time, I don't say narrow, but be able to be so hyper focused
Mhm.
to distill
Yeah,
things to a certain word.
yeah,
And so, and then even going and venturing, we're not going to digress, but into schools of
hmm
writing and schools of thought. Um,
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, in schools of thought, but even it'd be interesting to explore that by genre, you know.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, in defense of writers, though,
Mm,
I would say that sometimes I imagine what change is necessary and who's leading that change or who's at least fundamentally a part of that change.
mm,
And I think writers have always been that. So I don't know if that is synonymous with open-mindedness, but um, I think they're related.
yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Because I'm encountering young writers right now, and they're like, "Oh, should I enter this contest? Should I do this?" What are your thoughts on literary prizes and writing contests?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I always and I try to live by this. One of my little mantras to myself is to each her own or
Mm,
his own or their own. So, I mean, there's so many different paths, The MFA, of course, is one,
just one, yeah.
but not the only one.
Mm,
Um, a writing prize is clearly going to open some doors for a person. I think depending on the prize, it could absolutely accelerate one's visibility or even trajectory, although I hate to use that word.
yeah, yeah.
Um, one that comes to mind is a friend of mine, and she won the Whitman Prize for her first book, My
Mm,
Vang, who won for Afterland. It's a brilliant, deeply moving book, but what I think of my mostly is just a true poet who's writing aside from any kind of recognition. That's just
mm,
my
yeah,
feeling about it. If I think the prize becomes the end all, I think if it becomes
yeah,
more important than the work and the poetry, that would give me pause just
yeah,
as a person. But
yeah,
again, if that's
yeah,
what a person wants to do,
yeah.
I think that yeah, so I mean, there are upsides to it. Certainly it might afford certain opportunities and recognition, but it's absolutely not the only route to go. There are many ways that writers find their way. So yeah, I think it's probably subjective and
Yeah.
relative.
Yeah, that's a wonderful response. Yeah, because that prize shouldn't be your identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get caught up when we forget why we're writing in the first place. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if these examples will land, but I'm a big movie buff.
mm,
And someone like Martin Scorsese, who didn't win Best Director until The Departed,
oh, that's
or some of
interesting.
the great athletes throughout this country's history who've
Mm,
never won whatever title or championship, I don't think for 1 minute that lessens or diminishes their value or the things they've contributed or the ways that their work has impacted people's lives. So, yes, prizes are
yeah,
wonderful and they can have a real impact, but to me at least, they're not everything. And quite honestly, I don't. spend much time thinking about them.
What is your response to the word originality?
My response to the word originality. I like that. Well, I mean, I'm an etymology geek, so, I'm going to, I want to say Latin or Greek. I mean, I think about origin stories,
Mm,
you know. I
wow.
think I think about origins of many different kinds, human origins, plant origins, the origins of ideas fascinate me, and also how those ideas change over time and why. Um, with originality in poetry, I would e- I would I would think of it in the same way as I think of originality in another art form like music. So, for example, there's an art critic who said that we can, despite a recent tendency to say if we like it, that means it's good. She said that there can be standards, as much room as there can be within those standards for great art,
Mm,
purpose, vision, and craft or skill and originality. So in music, I was telling a group of students recently, if you know, say, for example, a group like Led Zeppelin or a group or artists like Stevie Wonder, you know them instantly because they're so original. People might try to sound like them, but they end up echoing each other. But the minute you hear something truly original, you know that it's that artist.
wow.
Um, that can't be taught, I think. That's on some other plane. And so I think as much as the craft matters, I think also just trying to bring out that person's originality or unique
Yeah,
fire that can fuel their work is really as important as any craft tool.
I love that response. That gave me goosebumps. All right, we need to move forward after that. That was, I think my heart stopped. Wow. Uh, what should writers write about?
Wow. What should writers write about? I mean, I don't know. I mean, and I don't mean to dismiss the question because it's a good
Hmm.
question, but I don't know that it's my place. But
Hmm.
having said that, it's my place to tell them. But having said that, I think whatever is truest,
Mm.
and I don't mean in a factual sense
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
details, but whatever is calling to them most. I'm thinking about Lord's great speech, The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action, which was actually a speech she delivered in 1977 in Chicago at MLA, but then it became that famous essay where
Wow.
the famous quotes like "Your silence will not save you" and things like that. So, um, she's saying, what are the words you do not have that you do not have yet?
Mm,
What are the words or the things that we want to say that we swallow and we just keep to ourselves until they become a tyranny? Those are her
mm,
words. What should a writer write about? I mean, that's the first place I go, is the things that are really calling to them. And it could be traumatic or difficult, but it could also be
mm.
joyful and funny. It could be a comic book or a graphic novel or whatever it might be. But um, yeah, I think there's something in there for me about joy and
Yeah.
meaning, um, something for the ancestors and the future all at once.
Um, how do you see time? Is it an ally or an enemy for writers?
Um, ally or enemy? I mean, I would probably throw in a third or fourth
Hmm.
uh, uh, descriptor there. Uh, in fact, I don't even know if I would frame it in that competitive language for me. Um, I think that it's certainly a gateway, and I think the past, especially as an adoptee, and my particular past with regard to time is very unknown. I haven't
Yeah.
met my birth mother or first mother or first father, so
Mm,
time is kind of a portal, almost takes on a physical
yeah.
quality for me. Um, these are really interesting questions, Robert. It's making me think how these things work in poems, but
Yeah.
to try to answer it succinctly, it's the most valuable
Mm.
thing in my life now. I know that for sure. It used to
Yeah.
be what, um, interestingly enough, it used to be competition. I was a big soccer person. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
you're a
yeah.
big soccer person.
Yeah, yeah.
So soccer and competition and all those things. But time is just the most meaningful thing in my life, whether that's with family or my daughter or other things. So yeah, I'd think of it in those terms.
Why, and again, if you can expand on these questions any way you want, don't ever feel pigeonholed. Why is writing a personal, physical, and or political occupation?
Hmm. Well, I mean, the physicality of it, I almost liken that writing sort of euphoric space where the writing is just leading the way, where the story or the poem takes on its own volition and we're just guiding it. Um, I liken that to what athletes call the zone,
Yeah.
where
Oh
they
yeah.
can't
Yeah.
explain
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
an interviewer might ask, I don't know, Steph Curry or some basketball player, how they could silence a crowd of 20,000 opposing fans who are screaming at them. You find this place, and I think with writing, that's how I think of it in terms of physicality.
Yeah.
Um, as far as personal, I mean, it's just a place where I always liked what Alice Walker said about poetry. It's the place for the leftover love and the
Ooh,
leftover anger,
wow.
and that's personal because I think we all have those emotions, um, sadness, uh, and the range of things we feel and experience. And we also all imagine. I think we also all dream.
Mm,
Um, And so I think it's personal in those ways. And the extent to which it's autobiographical probably varies
yeah.
from poet to poet, but certainly whatever form it takes, it's personal. Um, and did you say the last one was professional,
Oh, political.
political?
Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm probably not the only one, and
Yeah.
certainly not the first. I think it's always political. I think nearly every situation is
Mm,
political. um, including poetry or teaching it or professing it. I mean, if we teach at a public school, we are employees of the state,
yeah.
and that comes with certain policies. So it is by nature political. Anything rooted in a policy or that can be policed,
Mm,
including
mm,
language, the
mm.
body, texts, and things like that. So it's absolutely political. Um, I always think I would be remiss if I think that we can remove it from that context.
Yeah.
Now I can still and I still do absolutely read poetry and write it for pleasure, but
Yeah.
it's also in the context of our times, and those are political times.
On that note, what kind of voices, stories, symbols, metaphors do you feel that you have to include?
What kind of stories you say or voices?
Voices, stories,
Voices.
symbols.
Um, I don't know that I feel obligated to include anything, but
Mm,
I know that there are certain things that I tend to do,
yeah,
um, and just out of preference or habit, you know.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, I love anaphora, you know, just
mm,
repetition. I'm a
yeah,
big music person, so um, you know, those poet and many poets do it. Juan Felipe Herrera always comes to mind, and other poets who are using that kind of craft tool for to achieve some rhythm. Um, I don't intentionally go to metaphor, but I'm sure that that is part of my writing. Um,
mm,
I'm a big advocate for sound in poems, and I
mm,
like to
mm,
use sound in a poem. So that can be syllabics and beat, um, iambs and things like that. It can be um, other ways to achieve some sonic
yeah,
quality. I mean, one of my favorites is ascendaton, which is just three items listed without the conjunction. So
yeah,
like eat, pray, love, veni, vidi, vici, to achieve those kinds of things in a poem. But I don't want to get too deep into
yeah,
a
yeah, 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 yeah,
craft rabbit hole, but those are some things I think
yeah,
about. And honestly, I'm also always thinking about, not specifically, not literally, but I'm also always thinking about ancestry,
yeah,
the dead.
yeah, yeah,
Those are always part of my writing, I think, whether I want them there or not.
mm,
It's
yeah,
just always part of us.
yeah. And I love how you mentioned before too, just letting the writing guide you when you fall into that zone too. And when you get some distance and you come back to it, you're like, oh, I mean, I can't believe like this was written. And I don't want to say by me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I think that's important, you know, to not self-censor too much, especially early on in a draft, just to really let it pour out, you know. I think that that can be really good. Yeah.
who would you say you write for? Can you describe your audience? You know your demographic?
Hmm. Well, initially, I think I'm usually writing just for myself,
Yeah.
um, or myselves, past, present, future, you know, but
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
thinking about what is sort of coming through me.
Mm,
Um, Sometimes on a poem, I think about adoptees.
yeah.
Um, and then, like I said earlier, I'm often writing for an unknown dead
Mm,
or a known dead, but um, th those are the things that usually guide me. I'm definitely not writing to a trend or to please someone. That's not what I want to do. I
yeah.
I want to I want to write poems um, that aren't concerned about pleasing a particular editor or something like that. I mean, maybe later that comes into play in the editing, but initially, it's other things. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, why ought a writer travel?
Hmm. How much time do we have? Um, I mean, if one of the things that a writer benefits most from is a healthy imagination,
Yeah.
I I would say that that can be limited without travel.
Mm,
Um, I'll add though that it doesn't have to be 3 months in Paris or Tokyo. It could be, but I would say if you're, you know, I'm here in Fresno, I'd say if a person's never been to, say, Santa Cruz or
yeah.
LA or to the taqueria across
Yeah.
town,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Oh
is
yeah.
transporting to a new place and a new way of seeing. So just whatever is
Mhm.
in a person's area, we can start there and just branch out, not only in location, right? So try a new town over there, or if you're ready or if you want, to a new country, certainly. But also in just ideology,
Yeah.
just surround yourself in places where there's some discomfort and some strangeness with language or food. Be okay with not knowing everything. I'd say be okay with being lost for a while.
Yeah.
Those aren't bad things necessarily. And I think that um, for a writer, they can be extremely helpful.
Mm.
Just a long walk in the woods without the map. I mean, have a general sense when you need to get back and how to
Yeah,
get
yeah, yeah,
back.
yeah, for sure.
Just explore. It
Yeah.
can really open things up, you know.
Um, I have a couple existential questions and
Mhm.
then we'll ramp it up. Um, and only if you're comfortable. Um, what is grief?
Mm. Um, I was reading a book recently by a very well-known and accomplished writer for whom I have an immense amount of respect. And she had lost her father.
Mm.
Um, I couldn't guess her age, but she's probably around my age. Um, and she lost her father, and she was writing about that kind of grief. Um, I have not lost a parent yet, so I don't know that particular kind of grief yet. But when I think of grief, I think of profound, deep, perhaps inexplicable loss or sadness that that takes on the shape of grief. So when I bring this writer up
Mhm.
because I was thinking about my own situation as an adoptee, and I don't ever like to play, you know, oppression Olympics or who had it worse. So it's
Yeah,
not about that at all.
yeah,
But when I was reading this book, it occurred to me that as an adoptee, even though I don't know if my birth or first parents are dead, I haven't known them since infancy. And so that the adoptee, in essence, has grief inverted or thrust upon them as a baby, and they live with it throughout their life.
yeah.
Um, in some cases, they're asked to be grateful, or aren't you so lucky? So, grief, I think about families around the world right now who are separated by war or famine or other kinds of natural disasters. That's the area where I see grief, deeply profound, where the arts sometimes are one of the ways where we can try to make it through. I don't know how people make it through, but I hope with everything that I have that people do, you know. Yeah. And on that note, I would just say, and I didn't mean to bring it down, but if any listener here or anyone watching is experiencing something like that, um, we can make it through. There are ways to make it through. Yeah, so.
What is love?
Mm, you are a philosopher and a poet. Um, I almost want to go to the opposite and try to just say it succinctly, quote
Yeah,
some musician. Um, Gosh, I mean, there's that feeling that just takes over, when you're in it or you are around it. your constitution changes,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I could love a song, I could love a food, certainly people, you
Yeah.
know, family and friends and poetry. But yeah, grateful. I think about gratitude, um, to love and to have been loved, you know, those are pretty remarkable things.
One more philosophical question and two more questions, and
Sure,
we'll wrap
sure.
it up. What is the meaning of life?
You're not going to get me to try to answer that. Um, for every one thing that I know, Robert,
Yeah.
you know, there are probably hundreds of thousands that I don't.
Mm,
Um, although I will say that I don't think we're here. I don't think our purpose is to live in fear.
mm, yeah.
Um, I do think to different degrees, in different ways,
Mm,
I do think there are degrees of greatness and goodness in everybody. So, you know, maybe it's making its our way through the grief, you know, and sharing, giving, but
yeah.
you know, I don't know. Something related to joy too, I hope is in there. Yeah.
I dig that.
Do you know what I mean? Do you ever
Yeah. Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
all the joy. I want to
Yeah.
hear the good
Yeah.
music,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Our time is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
long here.
Yeah.
I want to taste all the good food
Yeah.
and see people if I can,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I meet people and they want to ask me, like in a non-religious, I'm like, enjoy life. And we know our time is short, so let's enjoy it together. We would love more.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, you know, and less energy on the things and the forces or people that
Yeah.
are interested in division and fear building,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you know, and just getting back to that yeah, I love that. We could love more. We can be more. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I know I said I wouldn't pigeonhole you, but I have to on this penultimate question. If you were stuck on the island and could only read one book over and over again, what would it be?
Whew, one book over and over again. What would it be? May I ask you yours? I'm curious if you have one. I put you on the spot. Only if you want. Only if you want.
Oh, you're the first person to do this to me.
Only if you want. You don't have.
Um, feel maybe. Oh, I okay. I'm tossed. Either between a collection of Emily Dickinson's poems and original Leaves of Grass. Only because there's layers,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
you will come back to it over and over again, depending on your experience, where you are. Uh, with more and more, there's just so much takeaway. There's
yeah.
in the philosophy of art, you know, in that shallow sense, there's a replay value, so much replay.
Mm,
Like, not that there isn't anywhere else,
yeah,
but you know, these two individuals definitely poured their life into their work. All right, you judo
yeah.
flip. You did a judo flip on me, Lee. What's your one?
I love it. I know I love what you were saying though. Yeah, Leaves of Grass definitely could be one of them. Um, if I had to pick something, say, you know, 19th century and earlier, definitely Leaves of Grass. If there's a contemporary book of poems that I always go back to, it's
Hmm.
one of my favorites, and I could see really getting a lot out of it year after year, would be Lee Young Lee's second book called The City in Which I Love You.
Hmm.
It's just one of my favorite books. Um, The City in Which I Love You. Um, yeah, so for poetry books, I would go with one of those.
All right, and then last question is,
Mhm.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, what advice would I give to my younger self? You know, I think depending on the age, it might vary, but it would probably be things like this at different times. One is that I think the biggest thing I would say is that it's going to be okay,
Mm,
and I would say that over and over in as many different ways as I could, with examples or any way to where the younger me would believe that. There was a time when I didn't see much of a future. So I would definitely tell myself it's going to be okay. Um, I would also say that there will be a place or places for your anger.
mm,
Um, um, and there will be people who will understand it and stand with you. You know, I was raised in a white family and they were very loving and we're still very close. But being the only person of color in America in the 70s or the 2020s is one thing,
yeah.
but in your family is another sort of
Mm,
level of isolation sometimes. So um, I would have probably told myself that. Um, and I had some teachers humble me, so I don't know if I would have needed to say it, but I think humility, it's like, Lee, take it easy. You don't know everything, Mr. So, um, yeah, and then just keep keep on, keep on. There are going to be beautiful things ahead that you can't imagine. I couldn't fathom the joys that were in this life and the difficulties. I've had many difficulties as well, but the joys that we find also, I would want to tell myself to keep an eye out for those things too. Um, yeah.
well, thank you so much, Lee Herrick, my young.
Hmm. I
Um,
appreciate that, Robert.
thank you
I'm
so
I'm
much.
really I'm really glad we could connect and thank you for having me on. And keep up all the good work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. And uh gotta see you in the Bay where let me show you around to whatever you want. Whatever you want. Uh
definitely. Definitely. We'll get some food.
for sure.
Okay.